You hold on tighter every year, and every year it slips further from your hands. Everything comes to you only when you let go. Look at the figure in the open water, not swimming, not sinking, only carried. Jung names what happens in you each time you squeeze. You smooth every surface, brace for every turn, and still you are going under in the effort meant to keep you afloat. By the end, you will know what truly returns when you let go. You already know this in your own hand. A clenched fist can hold nothing and tires within minutes, and still you have spent years making one at your entire life. What you are about to see is why the grip itself is the thing taking from you. Why the part of you that cannot stop managing is so small and so afraid, and what is actually buried under all that vigilance. You will meet a woman who learned this once with her whole body, in deep water, then spent the rest of her life forgetting it on dry land. You will learn the one law of the psyche that turns the thing you clutch into its opposite, and you will see the trap at the far end, the exact place where opening your hand turns into giving up, because the same letting go that frees you can keep going until there is nothing of you left to free. When you finally open your hand, what returns is something older than the thing you reached for, something you handed away in order to keep holding on. There is a woman, 71 years old, who taught piano for most of her life. She knows what it is to make 10 fingers obey, to take noise and give it time and shape, to drill a child until the wrong note stops ringing like an alarm in the chest. Order was her whole trade, and every Sunday she still irons her husband's shirts. She presses each collar flat, hangs them by color, runs the warm flat of her hand down the cotton long after the last wrinkle is gone. He has not buttoned a shirt himself in 2 years. The illness took that, the way it has been taking him room by room, slowly turning out the lights in the man she married, and the ironing is how she answers it. If she can keep this one thing in order, then the disorder has not yet taken the whole house. Long before the illness, the control was already her shape. She ran a household the way she ran a recital, every contingency rehearsed, every guest's preference remembered, the small disasters of a life caught and smoothed before anyone else noticed them. People called her capable, and they meant it kindly. Then one ordinary morning her husband stood in the kitchen holding his car keys and could not remember what they were for, turning them over in his hand like a strange coin, and the floor of her certain world tilted a few degrees and never quite came level again. From that morning, the smoothing had something real to push against, and it pushed harder every year. She would tell you she irons because she loves him, and she does. But there is a second thing in the room near midnight, standing just behind the love and doing most of the actual straightening: fear. The grip is too clever to announce itself as fear. It speaks in the vocabulary of duty, of discipline, of being the one who holds everything together. And it is fluent, and every word of it is partly true. What it never says out loud is the one plain thing all that fluency is built to keep quiet, the refusal to stand still inside something you cannot command. You know this hand, even if your house holds no illness. You have ironed your own version of those shirts, stayed 3 steps ahead of a room, managed a mood before you had your coat off, run tomorrow in your head as though rehearsal could keep the day from going wrong. Jung watches this in all of us and says it without softening it. Where the will to power runs the show, love goes quiet, and each one is the shadow of the other. The harder you manage the people you love, the less you are actually with them. You are guarding them, and control is the most exhausting way a person ever invented to feel safe, because the guard never gets to sit down, never gets to trust that the thing in front of him will still be there if he looks away. So he does not look away. He irons at midnight, and he calls it devotion. But if the grip is only fear that has learned to speak the language of love, then something inside her is doing the gripping. Jung points at one part of us in particular, and it is far smaller than you think. The part doing the gripping has a name. Jung calls it the ego, and he is careful to keep it small. The ego is only the center of your awareness, the lit room where the word I lives, the voice that plans and worries and decides. It is one part of the psyche and nothing more, while the whole of you runs much deeper, down to a wider order Jung calls the self, the part that has been arranging the real shape of your life on terms the lit room never signed off on. The lit room hates this. It would like very much to believe it is the whole house. The ego can endure a great deal of pain. What it cannot endure is the open question. For the woman with the shirts, the open question is whether her husband will know her face on Tuesday, and there is no plan on earth that answers it. Consider what the not knowing does to her in the small hours. She lies awake running the next day's appointment in her head, scripting her questions for the doctor, rehearsing his answers, building a little theater of certainty in the dark because the real day refuses to hand her one. Twice in the night she rises to check the front door, though she locked it, though he no longer wanders, because the locking is a thing her hands can do when her mind has run out of moves. The ego would rather perform a useless action than sit inside an open question, since the useless action at least feels like staying in charge. So she checks the locks. She runs tomorrow before it arrives, because running feels like doing, and doing feels better than standing inside the not knowing. Therefore, the ego reaches for one more variable to manage and calls the reaching care. Give it certainty and it relaxes for an hour. Take the certainty away and it starts pressing collars again. And yet the wider order Jung points to had been holding her up the whole time, beneath the noise of the lit room, through seasons the planning never planned for. It got her out of bed on the mornings she could not have argued herself into standing. It sat her down at the piano in the hardest years of the marriage, the ones nobody outside the house ever saw, when the only steady language left to her was the one her hands already knew without being told. The self works quietly and takes no credit. It goes on arranging the deeper shape of a life, while the lit room claims the parts that went to plan and frets over the parts that did not. That small, frightened room has been riding on something far steadier than itself, and has never once thought to look down and see what was carrying it. This is why letting go never feels like rest. It feels like falling, because to the ego, every loosened finger is a small rehearsal of its own death. The lit room would rather run itself ragged than admit the house was never its to run. To that small, frightened self, the word surrender and the word dying ring the same alarm, and the alarm does not stop to ask which one is really at the door. And there is one part of this the illness has never reached. Her husband is not coming back to her whole. The disease does not bargain, and any promise that pretends otherwise is a lie she is too clear-eyed to keep believing. Whatever waits to return to her then lives on the far side of that loss rather than in place of it. What waits is a person she herself misplaced long before he ever got sick, and to reach her she has to go down past the fear, into the thing the fear is built on top of. So go beneath that fear, and you find the thing the ego works hardest to keep buried. Grief. Not the grief of the funeral, which the world allows, which comes with casseroles and cards and a date on the calendar. The other kind. The grief for a thing while you are still in the middle of losing it, the grief that arrives without a permission slip and finds every door in the culture politely shut. She remembers a version of him the present has no room for, the man who used to hum tunelessly while he made the morning coffee, badly, always the same 4 notes, a private little song he never knew he was singing. He does not hum anymore. She cannot tell you the day it stopped, which is its own particular cruelty, that the last time of a thing slips by without ever announcing itself as the last. She is mourning a man in fragments while he sits 2 feet away from her, and the world has built no ritual for that, no casserole, no card that says, "I am sorry for the parts of him you have already had to bury." So the grief, denied its proper season, leaks sideways into the only thing she is allowed to do, which is manage and fix and keep the shirts in order. Control is what grief becomes when it is not allowed to feel itself. The hand that will not stop fixing is a hand that has not been given permission to mourn. You may keep no failing husband, but you know this hand. It is the one that overgives until it is empty, that anticipates everyone's needs so well that nobody has to ask, that makes itself so useful it can never be set down. And this is the hand a great many people watching will recognize as their own, the overfunction that looks so much like virtue from the outside that it rarely gets called what it is. You answer every message within the hour. You carry the emotional weather of a whole family. You have a sense, tuned over a lifetime, of exactly how much of yourself to give away so that you will not be set down. The world rewards you for it, which is the trap. The world calls a frightened person generous and hands them more to carry. Somewhere far back, you learn that being needed was the safest way to be kept, that a person who is indispensable does not get left. So you made yourself indispensable, and you called it generosity. Therefore, the giving never fills you back up, because a softer hand is still a closed one, and a closed hand keeps even as it pretends to give. Jung's whole psychology turns on one stubborn fact. What you refuse to feel does not leave you. It goes under, the way the rip runs unseen beneath a calm surface, and from down there it pulls the true direction of your life while you stand on the beach, certain you are choosing it. The grief you will not grieve becomes the grip you cannot open, and year after year the closing becomes the only thing the hand still remembers how to do. But the cruelest turn is what that closed hand does to the very thing it is trying to save. There is a law for that, older than psychology, and Jung gave it back its name. The law is called enantiodromia. Jung takes the word from the old Greek Heraclitus and uses it as a working principle of the psyche. Push any force far enough toward one extreme, and it turns into its opposite. Hold on hard enough, and you begin to lose. Force certainty, and you breed dread. Clench a relationship, and you make the air inside it too thin to breathe. The woman with the shirts knew this once, with her whole body, half a century ago. She was young, swimming off a gray northern coast, when the water took her. A rip current, the kind that does not pull you down but pulls you out, away from the shore, faster than any swimmer alive can fight head-on. She fought it. Of course she did. She swam straight at the beach with everything she had, toward the towels and the bright umbrellas and her own shoes in the sand, and for every stroke the sea carried her further out, and she felt her arms turn to wet rope inside her shoulders. She was going to drown in plain sight of the shore. Then something in her changed. She stopped fighting the one direction that was killing her, and that was a different thing entirely from giving up. She remembered from some half-heard summer warning that you do not beat a rip current by aiming at the beach, that you swim across it, sideways, out of its narrow lane, and let it spend itself while you slip free of it. So she turned her body 90 degrees and stopped pouring herself into the stroke that was feeding the sea. The current kept pulling. She stopped pulling back against it, and in a minute that felt like an hour, the water simply let her go, and she swam in on dead-tired arms and lay on the sand and shook, alive. If you have ever worn yourself out fighting the very thing that was trying to carry you, you already know this in your body. Write it down in the comments. I was drowning from how hard I swam. That is enantiodromia in a single body. The very effort that should save you is the thing the ocean uses to keep you, and the only difference is the direction you spend it in. She came home from that beach with the lesson written into her muscles, and then she spent 50 years failing to read it on land. Because the sea announces itself. You can see the water taking you. The currents of a life are quieter. The pull of a marriage going wrong, of a child drifting, of a mind beginning to fail, does not look like a current at all. It looks like a problem to be solved by trying harder, and trying harder is the one response that feeds it. So she fought the water of her own life for decades, swimming straight at the shore she wanted, while the thing she loved was carried further out with every stroke. The marriage, the child, the dream, the diagnosis, every current larger than your two arms obeys the same law. The things you love go airless from how hard the hand closes. The leaving was never about holding them too loosely. And Jung is honest about what kind of thing this is. He found that the greatest and most important problems of a life are never really solved. They can only be outgrown, dissolved by some wider life rising up underneath them, rather than forced open from the front. The current beneath your marriage is not the current beneath mine, which is why no video, this one included, can hand you the exact way out. It can only tell you to stop making the move that is drowning you. But the water turns most dangerous right here, in a way you would not expect. She got out of the sea by stopping. But on dry land there are two ways to stop, and only one of them is swimming free. The other is simply slipping under quietly, while everyone on the beach decides you have finally learned to relax. For a long stretch after the diagnosis, the stopping inner went too far. She had spent years fighting the current, ironing against the dark, and when the fight finally drained out of her, the quiet that came felt like relief. She stopped demanding him back the way he was, but the stopping did not know where to end. It kept going. She stopped wanting much of anything, stopped phoning the friends who tired her, stopped hearing the music she had given her life to, and she moved through her days slow and muffled and far away, the way you move when some wordless part of you has decided that reaching for things only costs you. She told herself this was the acceptance the calm voices kept promising. It was the same drowning as before, only quiet now, and pointed straight down. She remembers the precise afternoon she understood how far she had drifted. A friend phoned with news that would once have moved her, good news, the kind that deserves a caught breath and a laugh, and she heard herself answer with the right words in a voice that belonged to someone else. A flat, courteous voice with no one living behind it. She hung up and stood in the quiet kitchen and felt nothing about the nothing. And that second emptiness frightened her more than any grief ever had, because grief at least is a sign that something in you is still moving toward the world. That afternoon, she understood that she had not made peace with anything. She had simply stopped swimming and let herself begin to sink in water so still that nothing showed on the surface. What saved her in the water, half a century before, was never stillness. It was the one thing she did instead of thrashing. When she stopped fighting the rip, she did not stop swimming. She turned and swam across it, sideways, her arms still working, her whole will still bent on living, only no longer spent against the one direction that was killing her. That is the distinction the calm voices flatten into nothing. Stopping the fight is not the same as going limp. The fighting stops and the swimming does not. The arms still pulling, only now along the current instead of straight into it. So the question is never how calm you look from the shore. The question you have lain awake with on your own hardest nights, whether you ever had a name for it, is whether anything in you is still swimming. This is what Jung describes as the art of letting things happen, action through non-action. It sounds like a contradiction, and it is not. You stop forcing without stopping moving. You keep your hands open and your arms working at the same time. You want the thing with your whole chest and refuse to close your fist around its throat. Of all the disciplines a life can ask of you, this is among the hardest, which is why the exhausted so rarely manage it. Resignation is the easy mercy, because all resignation has to do is stop. This is the exact place where every gentle promise about letting go quietly lies to you. Letting go is no technique for making the thing you wanted finally arrive. The sea did not give the woman back her husband's mind because she stopped fighting. What the current decides, the current keeps. The grief stayed grief. So the title turns its face to you at last and asks the only question left. If the thing you gripped is not what comes back, then what does? She finds out the way she found out in the water half a century ago, by going slack in the one direction that was killing her and discovering what the sea hands back to a swimmer who finally stops. When she finally stopped fighting the current, the sky did not open and hand back the man she married. Surrender pays out in a stranger currency than that. What came back first was her own self, the woman who had spent years pouring everything she had into holding back a tide that was never going to be held. All that energy, the ironing, the double-checked locks, the rehearsing of tomorrow turned around and flowed back toward its source. And the source was her own life, sitting exactly where she had set it down decades before. This is what Jung means by coming back to yourself. The energy you have cast onto the thing you were trying to control comes home, and your center of gravity moves back inside you, where the day can no longer carry it off whenever it pleases. He calls the long version of this individuation, and it is far quieter than the word sounds. It looks like almost nothing from the outside. It looks like an old woman returning by inches to the middle of her own life, the way a swimmer washes back to a shore she was no longer aiming for. There was a Sunday, not long after, when she set the iron down mid-shirt and left the rest in the basket and went and sat beside him on the edge of the bed. He was watching the light move on the wall the way he does now, with a kind of attention she used to find unbearable to witness. She took his hand. He looked at her without certainty, searching her face for a name he could not find, and then he smiled at her anyway, the way you smile at a kindness from a stranger, and squeezed her fingers back. A year before, that smile would have broken her, because it was proof of everything she was losing. That Sunday, she let it be only what it was, a warm hand in hers in the afternoon light, and it was enough, and she did not reach past it for the man it used to belong to. Slowly from that recovered center, a life began to arrange itself around her again. Not the life she would have drafted. The grand reunion she had spent years demanding never arrived, because the current was never going to hand it back. What arrived instead was smaller and stranger and somehow more solid. An ordinary Tuesday she could actually stand inside, a friendship she had once had no energy for, an afternoon that asked nothing of her but to be present in it. This is the part the consoling videos can never say, because it does not flatter. What comes to you when you let go comes on terms you did not set, from a deeper place in you than the one that was doing the wanting. The woman still irons some Sundays, but the iron is just an iron now, no longer a wall thrown up against the dark, and some Sundays she leaves the shirts in the basket. He does not always know her name, he knows her hands, and she has stopped needing him to know more than that to feel that her life is still her own. The exhaustion from the beginning of all this, the breath held so long she forgot it was a choice, is finally gone. There was no victory in it. She had only stopped bleeding herself out into a grip that was never going to hold the sea. You are somewhere on that same coast right now, swimming hard at a shore that keeps backing away from you. You have been spending your whole strength fighting the only thing wide enough to carry you, and that fight is the exhaustion, all of it. What you want will not come from a tighter grip, and it will not come from going numb and renaming the numbness piece. What does come when you finally turn sideways and stop spending your last strength on the stroke that is drowning you, is the one thing you were always too busy to keep: yourself. If you have felt that quiet pull underneath everything you keep chasing, the sense that the thing you really wanted was never out there to begin with, leave it in the comments before you go. What I was reaching for was myself. So whatever you have been holding your breath against, you can let it out now. The danger may not have passed. It was simply never yours to hold back with your two bare hands. The moment you stop, the water that was taking you begins, very quietly, to carry you home.
Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com.